Welcome to another episode Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Special Friday night live episode Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 241. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail from Communities Digital News, uh, Jacob from Jab Hook. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hey, it's a rare Friday night edition with all the preview right up to date, as up to date as we ever get.
Right. Sometimes it turns out that way. Busy schedules and whatnot. Had to do it on a Friday. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report live YouTube show, podcast, as well as blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we'll talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is if it's concerned with the sweet science, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all the information about Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to go to, P4P Boxing Report. .wordpress.com. That's the link. Check the right of the blog page. You'll find links to where to find Pound for Pound Box Report all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, what's left of G Plus, as well as where to find the podcast on all available platforms that carry podcasts, minus Spotify. I got to work on getting the show on Spotify. And if you want to donate, let donation be the best nation. 50 cents, a dollar, $2, $5. I don't care how big or how small. Any kind of donation helps. If you also check the Rider blog page, you will see a link to a PayPal as well as a Cash Me app. Uh, so let's get things started. Ladies first, as always. Since we started this show really late in the week, airing the show really late in the week, excuse me, going to kind of go back a bit to what went down last weekend. Discussing some fights that went down last weekend. Let's start Minnesota. Rob Brant fighting a young fighter by the name of Khasan. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because I will butcher it. Brant making the first defense of his WBA middleweight title. Of course, Brant scored one of the upsets of the year, beating Marodi Murata emphatically last year to win the belt last October. Made his first defense, and I go to you, Gail. Brant, he won by 11th round KO. He was impressive. He controlled the action against the young kid, but even though Brant dominated, there was one big time flaw that I saw. He has a bad habit of leaning forward on the front foot. Because the fighter he fought was so inexperienced, it didn't come back to harm him. But as he steps up in competition, and after the fight, he talked about wanting to fight Canelo, wanting to fight the big names at middleweight. That fatal flaw has to be corrected.
Yeah, it does. But what Brant did do is prove that his win over Murata wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't one of those crazy one-shot deal upsets. He showed pretty much the same positive qualities that allowed him to prevail over Murata. He is not a one-shot, one-kill type of puncher. He's a destruction by attrition kind of guy. And I have just never seen anybody in this big a weight class with the punch output of a guy like Brant. It really is impressive and very unique to him and in the middleweight division. How is that going to set up, though, against the guys who do have the big punch, one punch knockout capability? You know, it leaves him more vulnerable because he doesn't have that kind of firepower. So he's got to get in there and be up close and personal continually. And it does put him at risk. But against an opponent like he had, which was a showcase homecoming fight for him, which he definitely earned, you know, he wasn't really in any danger, and he knew it. But you're right. There are some things he's got to work on. You know, he's not a 22-year-old, so he can't really be wasting any time. And, you know, it'll be very interesting for us to watch what kind of skill he can pick up. You know, is he ready for the elite of the middleweight division, which is still a very strong division? Probably not, but God bless him. I like his attitude. I like what I see from him, and you know, let him try. Frankly, though, what you should do, and I know he wants it, is rematch with Murata. And there's some discussion about that. So we'll see.
And that junior middleweight range, not since the days of Paul Williams have we seen a fighter with that kind of who with that kind of punch rate. And I'll go to you, Jacob. Your impressions on what you saw. Answer Gail's question about whether he's can compete with the elite. Right now, I would say no. I personally think that Canelo would beat him. I think Triple G would beat him. I think Charlo would beat him. I think that Daniel Jacobs would beat him as well. So again, your breakdown of the fight and where do you see him going from here?
You mean Canelo, the super middleweight?
He technically has a belt, but still, he's a middleweight.
I know. I'm just joking.
It's gonna be one of those kind of shows tonight.
I gotta get my punches into.
You know, so, yeah, he has that Canelo weight. We all know that. So
yeah. I mean, Brant, like kind of what Gail said. I think he's proven that that wasn't a fluke. He definitely has skills, but he is hittable, which I think is one of his flaws, along with the one you mentioned where he kind of leans forward. So I think against the elite, I agree with you guys. I don't think that. I mean, we haven't really seen him get hit by a puncher to see how that affects him and how he gets out of that adversity. So I think he loses against the top guys. I think if he fought someone like a Charlo or Jacobs or Canelo, or Golovkin, he would, if he gets hit, and he can't take a good punch or he panics, it could be an early night for him. The fight overall was pretty good as far as action packed. His opponent was it Baysangurov? He went down in the second round with kind of a weaker punch, kind of like behind the ear, and then the 11th round it's something very similar. But he was punching. He actually had a pretty good 10th round. But the scorecards were pretty wide, as they should be. But Brant probably would be best to maybe try to make that Murata fight because he'll probably win it again, and he can pick up some more money before he gets to those elite status, and potentially loses his belt. So I mean, try to get as much payday as he could. Like you said, he's 28. So but I mean, I like the kid. I think he goes in there and I think he leaves it in the ring. So I mean, you can't ask more than that.
Let's move on to talk about one more fight before we get into kind of the news and whatnot. A lot of news has been happening over the past week or so. Leo Santa Cruz fought the headline on the PBC card, coming back to the ring after, I want to say, 8-9 month layoff. Fought a guy by the name of Rivera, and I'll go to you on this one, Jacob. Santa Cruz, he won and won convincingly, but I'm disappointed in a sense. I'm disappointed in his performance. The overall fight was meh. Santa Cruz didn't even need to step out of one gear, and not just the overall fight, Jacob, but his comments after the fight in terms of what's next and who he wants in the future. I get it that he was trying to get back into the swing of things. It's just that the opponent, the opponent number one, and his overall performance, in spite of dominating, left me a bit underwhelmed. Am I being too critical here?
No, I don't think so. I think early on when Santa Cruz was being touted as a talent, but he really didn't have that defining fight, and then he finally got it. I think against Mares, And then, of course, he had the fight with the back-to-back fights with Frampton. I think people started to recognize that, he's a very skilled fighter and exciting fighter. But his activity level and his opponents, in between some of these fights have been, a little lackluster. And so I think in a way we'd like to see him against the elite, because I think he can be in exciting, good fights. And I think he can win those fights. But for some reason, his activity level has gone down. He only fought once last year, and he's fought once this year. But I mean, there was a good 8-month gap in between there. So when you have a champion and you get a guy like Santa Cruz, and he was relatively young, and hasn't taken like too much damage, you kind of want to see him, unify or fight people. One of the fights I would love to see is the Warrington fight, if they could make it, because I think Warrington, he showed he's willing to basically do anything to get that shot, and he took the bull by the horns, and he's very conditioned and he has a good work rate, and you got Santa Cruz, who's kind of like maybe a Mexican version of that, where he's also well conditioned, has a good work rate. So I think it'd be an excellent fight, and it'd be a unification fight. So hopefully we can get that. We don't know what's going to happen with Gary Russell, because is he going to fight one time a year, and who's he going to fight? So hopefully they can get a meaningful fight. But Santa Cruz has to do his part though too, and be asking for the fights, and not sit on the shelf.
I see Daniel has joined us on the show. Thanks for joining us, Daniel. And I go back to you, Jacob. Quick follow up. You're right. I too would like to see Santa Cruz fight a Warrington, a Gary Russell, a Valdez. But when talking about future opponents, he mentioned Frampton, a third fight. Why?
Well, I don't know, maybe because they're 1-1, so I mean it's like tiebreaker fight, but yeah, that's really the wrong message to be sending. I mean, Frampton just lost to Warrington, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense at this stage. I mean, you think you'd want to unify and have that exciting fight, but I don't know, maybe he doesn't want it. Maybe he sees Frampton's kind of on the downside of his career after the tough fight with Warrington, and thinks that it's going to be just an easy fight. I mean, I kind of think he thought that with the second Mars fight, like that was kind of an easy, he was going to win, and that Mars doesn't really have what it takes to beat him. So, that's unfortunate. But like I said, I think he's really got to try to get some goodwill back, or he's gonna become one of those people that people kind of talk about as talented, but never really, reached his full potential.
I'll go to you, Gail, and then you can follow up, Daniel, get you into the discussion. Am I wrong giving such hard side eye to the fight and to Santa Cruz's commentary afterwards in terms of talking about a third fight with Frampton instead of talking unification, Gail?
Well, if you're wrong, I don't want to be right. I agree with you. I sat watching this fight, and I get it. Rivera was a last-minute replacement. It happens. At least they kept the fight on the calendar, which is a smart thing to do. But his original opponent, Moises Fuentes, who wasn't exactly a barn burner either, was out 4 weeks before the fight. So we get Rafael Rivera. Hey, props to the kid who's willing to risk his record, get in there. I'm sure for him, it was a great experience. But it's really rare. I sit in front of a TV screen watching a fight, and I find my attention wandering because I'm bored. I'm just friggin' bored. Leo Santa Cruz, to me, is just the most boring champion that's out there right now, which means that he should fight a guy who's in the top 10 of the division again and see what happens. Guillermo Rigondeaux. But I digress. When Santa Cruz was coming up, Everyone was very impressed at the potential that they could see in him. And he was one of the first PBC guys who was being brought up incredibly slowly. So carefully, it was like he was some precious family heirloom being wrapped in bubble wrap or something. And it was painful to watch his progress being so slow. And then finally, it seemed like he kicked it up into gear. The first Mars fight did wonders for him. The loss to Frampton, honestly, did wonders for him. You know, it showed he was finally willing to take really tough fights. He had a nice little string there of fights. And then all of a sudden, here we are back again with his career absolutely making no forward progress whatsoever. And then we ask, who do you want to fight again? Carl Frampton? Yeah, that was my attitude too when I heard that. And I also thought, dude, you're not very creative. Okay, I get it. You don't want to fight Oscar Valdez, and that's probably not a makeable fight for promotional reasons. All right. You're afraid of Warrington. You're afraid of Gary Russell, clearly. Mares is done. Mares is done. Then let's look at the rest of the featherweight division. We're really in between generations of fighters already. We've got the Santa Cruz generation already, and you can toss Rigondeaux into that mix if you like. And then the next tier down are the guys like Shakur Stevenson, or even King Tug, the Turkish fighter, Yambiar. Kanju is now in the mix, the Chinese fighter.
Conlon is fighting at 126 or 130.
You know, it's funny. He's fighting at both, but he is listed on a lot of the records. And if you go into BoxRec, he's listed under featherweight. So wouldn't that be an interesting fight to make? And you know that guy would. He seems to me like he'd be all about it. Got to get a little more creative, and maybe it takes some of these younger guys stepping up. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, featherweight, you do have a half dozen guys at the top, but it's not a real top-heavy division. You then have to step down quite a bit to see some of the rising talent. And again, Stevenson, you know, for a variety of reasons, that's not happening. So Santa Cruz's options are somewhat limited. He can't afford to be picky, and the clock is ticking with him. On the other hand, he's never really struck me as truly deep down in his heart, super ambitious for himself. He fights for his family. He's always fought for his father. He has always wanted to please his father. And since his father's illness, it's been even more of a driver for him. But his boxing drive seems to be very external to me and not internal, or he wouldn't be going back to stuff like Frampton, and he wouldn't be having these fights that are just not real inspiring. And it's a shame, because I do think the talent's there. I slightly question the will.
Your reaction to the fight, Daniel, and what Santa Cruz himself proposed in terms of future opponents.
I actually just got done watching the fight, and it was pretty much a typical Santa Cruz performance where his motor got going, he started attacking the body early, and he was able to pretty much wear his guy down with body shots, and then fighting from a somewhat of a distance, but still getting inside. Now, I got to give credit all to Rafael Rivera. He came in late notice, showed that he was ready to come to the ring, and presented himself pretty well, particularly in the first round. But that was a fight where Santa Cruz was too big, too much of a reach advantage, and too much experience at that level. That being said, I wouldn't call him boring as far as like what his position is. I think he's too much of a realist in a way. I think he realizes in ways like I can't fight Gary Russell because Gary Russell's gonna adhere to this one fight a year crap that he does. We know
though he recently said he wants to fight more than once a year, and one of those fights being a unification bout with Santa Cruz.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I'll believe it when I see it. If that was the case, he should have fought this month already. But there's that. There's this schedule at the moment. You can't find Morris again because if Morris is a situation where if he's not retired, he should be. You're kind of done. And Warrington is going to be busy, unfortunately, with Kid Galahad for the time being. So it kind of makes sense where he felt like, okay, well, I might as well fight Frampton then. Like, there's obviously they have to deal with. They obviously have to settle that score. But the problem is that Frampton is not the same. That's not the same Frampton that he fought the first fight, near or the second fight. Josh Warrington took something out of Frampton in that fight. So it's a realistic move to say these are the opponents. Is it a move that fans want? No. You want to hear, I want to reunite with Valdez. I want to unify with Warrington. I want to unify with Russell. But I also understand it because I do agree with Gale where it doesn't look like he's one of the fighters where he doesn't fight because he deep down really, really loves the sport. Even though he's really good at it, he does like it. He fights because there's other people depending on him, mainly his family and his father. And he fights because he's good at it. And that's going to keep motivating. And you have to realize he's also one of Al Heyman's favorites.
Didn't he name one of his kids after Al?
Yeah. I remember. His son has a middle name after Al Heyman. Yep. So he's one of Heyman's favorites.
Yeah, to the point that he got paid $1 million for this fight.
Yep. So right now, if you're one of the favorites and the promoter and you just fought Rafael Rivera and you fight because other people depend for you and because you're good at it, do you think risk is actually going to fall into your thinking? Very likely not. Because you can pretty much now guarantee, say, I will be able to make 7 figures no matter who I fight, just because I'm one of Al's favorites. It's disappointing, but it's realistic at the same time.
Look, I don't want to be too hard on him. He may eventually fight Gary Russell this year. He may engage in a unification bout with one of the other champions, but again, that opponent and his commentary afterwards left me, again, for lack of a better word, disappointed in what I heard. Let's move on to some news here. I'm going with a story here that I didn't put in the docket. It just came to my mind, and I'm going to you on this one first, Daniel. Features one of your favorite fighters, Billy Joe Saunders, who, look, he was suspended last year for a positive test. WBO took him out of the rankings. Saunders was supposed to defend his WBO middleweight title against Demetrius Andrade. Andrade won the vacant belt, but his suspension was lifted. The BO had basically put him in a position where he could have got the rematch got the eventual fight with Saunders. And then you hear that Saunders is fighting for the vacant 168-pound title, WBO version, the title that was vacant by Gilberto Ramirez, who's moving up to 175. What say you of one of your favorite fighters, Billy Joe?
First of all, once again, it just goes to show you that there's a reason why in the UK WBO stands for the Warren Boxing Organization. And number two, I kind of laughed when I first heard about it because I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a good way to get to a title without facing Andrade.
That's what it sounds like to me. He just didn't want none of Andrade.
No,
he lived up to his Billy Ho nickname.
Yep, and that's a disappointment in a way because as much as I rag on him because he deserves every bit of ragging that we give him, he's also very good. That's the problem. He's also very good. Like, you want him to exceed your expectations to prove you wrong. He did soon, and the last time we've seen that is with David Lemieux, but then again, that was a David Lemieux that doesn't do much. And with Andrade, he was going to face a guy that not only can box, but can bang at the same time and can do it at a distance. Now, okay, you're fighting for a vacant title because
against the guy we never heard of.
A dude I never heard of this bastard, and and it's only because the previous champion himself is having issues making weight. So I'm not surprised by it. It's a Frank Warren move. I get it, but at the same time, just admit this pretty much also should squash pretty much any assumption that he was actually willing to face Gennady Golovkin.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that was it.
I'll go to you, Gail and Jacob. Your reaction to the news regarding Billy Joe Saunders deciding to move up to 168, which seems like to me just pick up an easy belt rather than fight Andrade, which the WBO basically put him in a position to fight Andrade. And he was like, nope.
Boxing's a tough sport. I get it. It's hard. It's really hard. And when some guys get a chance for the easy money, they say, hell yeah, why not? Why the hell not? Why wouldn't I want to earn a big paycheck? And Frank Ward's motivated. In the UK, Saunders puts the butts in seats. He makes people money. So yeah, they're going to give him a little prize, to thank him and make a few bucks all around without him having to risk a whole lot. And I don't like it. I don't love it. I wish guys didn't operate that way, but I do sometimes understand it. It's human nature. He gets to pick up an easy belt, a nice paycheck. A lot of people make money. His fans, of which he has plenty over there, unlike here, and unlike on the Pound for Pound report, he gets to, make those folks happy. Great. That's nice for them. Do I care? Hell no, I don't care. He's a non-issue to me. End of discussion.
He's a non-MF factor. Your thoughts, Jacob?
So he pulled a Canelo. He got inspiration from Canelo. He's going up a division to go get an easy belt and to get a little payday.
Yeah, well, yeah. And they go up a division because they don't have to train as hard. They don't have to struggle to make weight.
Yeah, because who had heard of Rocky Fielding besides him being the victim of Smith before the Canelo fight?
Well, now what we can say is we've all heard of him now.
Yeah, and same thing with this.
Yeah, and he got paid well. For a guy in his position, those guys can't afford to say no. And right. I absolutely do not blame them for taking the check. Just like Rivera, although believe it or not, did you see the purse? Going back to the
he only got like $30,000 for that
$20,000.
Oh, 20.
$20,000 in purse. Maybe they paid him some other consideration. I don't know. But what? Are you kidding me? Come
you
on.
Stop yourself from cussing. I see there, Gail.
I know. I'm really trying to be good. Uncle Al should have written out a nice big fat thank you check to young Mr. Rivera for keeping his main event intact. Please.
Well, he spent so much money on Leo Santa Cruz, he probably doesn't have enough to give out to anybody else.
True. So, you know,
I mean, he's basically been giving Santa Cruz $1 million a fight.
Yeah, he earned $1 million for this fight, and I think he may have earned $1 million for his previous fight as well. So
he did. He earned $1 million. He earned $1 million for when he fought Frampton. I think just under for the second fight, and that's just published purses, but there could be some extra bonuses for winning and things like that. So
well, it's keeping the money in the family. Just like hiring his daughter and.
Yep.
And y'all know who his daughter's engaged to. So, we got that going on too.
Yeah. Let's move on to another news story. I'll start with you, Jacob, and then you can follow up, Daniel and Gail. After Richard Comey won the IBF belt, he was in position to fight Vasiliy Lomachenko unification bout at lightweight. Turns out that Comey hurt his right hand in his knockout win over Chimaev to win the title. News dropped earlier this week that we now will have Lomachenko fight Anthony Crolla. Crolla is I believe his #1 contender. Fight is going to happen April 12th. Your reaction to that? Did you just see was with Comey out that Lomachenko was in no position other than to fight the mandatory, or do you feel he could have went another route?
I mean, I really wanted to see Comey fight Lomachenko. I thought that Comey had some factors that could make the fight, competitive and difficult. And we'd get to see, again, another version maybe of Lomachenko to see if he can, show us some more of what, why people are putting him on the top pound for pound list. I mean, Crolla isn't really who I would prefer him to fight, but I mean, it's not Lomachenko's fault that Comey's hurt. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I don't think that Crolla is going to do too much. He had the 2 fights with Linares and lost both of those pretty easily. So I don't expect that he'll do anything spectacular in this fight. So it is a little bit disappointing. Lomachenko, I want to see him fight tougher fights, kind of like what we were talking about Leo Santa Cruz. I think the guy's talented, and he has fought some good fights, but he's also fought. I think his only in the last few years, his only real challenge has been that Linares fight. Because when he fought Rigondeaux, Rigondeaux was coming up a couple weight classes. Mariaga was coming up a weight class and coming off a loss. A lot of these guys were smaller guys, coming up. So, I'd like to see a little bit more from Lomachenko. But again, like I said, part of this isn't his fault, and I like my fighters to stay active. So, he's coming off that surgery he had. He had the fight with Pedraza, which went a lot farther than people thought it would go. Or a lot farther than people thought it would, end up. But, we'll see what happens. I mean, Crolla's, he's got a decent record, but I don't think he's going to pose much of a challenge.
First of all, before I go to Daniel and Gail to respond to the news of Lomachenko, I want to thank Fink, Big Rot Napa for joining us in the live YouTube chat. Read some comments there. Fink says he thinks Santa Cruz put on a good performance. As fun as Warrington is, Santa Cruz has shown us sublime skill. Maybe Warrington will get Valdez fight. Or Russell, who Fink considers the most boring champion in the division. Big Rotten Apple says he's a fan of Al Heyman. Did you see the recent article, Boxing Scene? regarding Vanes Monterosa, regretting that he left and badmouthed Al Heyman and said he would go back immediately. Let's touch on that right quick before we go on to continue on to the discussion in terms of Lomachenko and Crolla. Your reaction to Vanes basically having kind of a mea culpa in terms of his criticisms of Al Heyman in the past. And anybody who wants to chime in and respond, please do.
People love easy money. That's the main thing. And like, one thing you'll say about Al, a lot of his fighters, it's mainly easy money what they get into. And I get it, like he left on pretty bad terms because he thought he wasn't getting a shot. But in the meantime, he wasn't able, he saw that 154 is not exactly a land that Al Heyman right now doesn't almost completely, utterly dominate. And being like the only major fight was he took a beating at the hands of Gennady Golovkin. So now he sees himself as, okay, I'm a 154-pound fighter. And the guy that I just cussed out pretty much runs the division. With the exception of one other fight. And if I take that fight, I'll still be mollywopped. So I tend to get like it's an understandable part of business. Is one of the reasons why when you hear a guy defect from Al Heyman, it becomes shocking. Like when Danny Jacobs effectively defected from Al Heyman to Matchroom, it was shocking because you don't expect that. One of the things that Al Heyman gains is a lot of favor and a lot of loyalty from his fighters because he is able to reward them financially for very little risk at times. The question...
go ahead.
Say again?
Go ahead.
I said, like, the question is going to be, though, well, I'll take him back because otherwise Monterosa has to decide I'm going to become a middleweight and I'm just going to become a punching bag at his own. So it doesn't look good on either plane.
Gail, Jacob, any quick words in terms of the recent comments from Vanes?
Well, Vanes originally said he was going to retire, which would have been the right decision. But, these guys, then they regret it. And then he realizes, what are my opportunities out there? Well, he could fight in Southern California on some of the smaller promoter cards. I mean, Jacob, we could see him in Ontario and, Riverside and all that stuff forever. But he needs to make more money on fewer fights. So he only really sees one avenue. And I do think these guys genuinely regret sometimes having these war of words with guys. And then later they realize I did myself some damage and, now I have to eat crow if I want to have a shot. And say what you will from the fans' perspective or the matchmaking perspective about what happens with Heyman-represented fighters. But from the fighter's perspective, he takes care of them. And he does give them, they're almost employees, not legally and not from a financial standpoint completely, but it's not dissimilar to what, the setup is with Dana White and his mixed martial arts fighters. Those people, men and women, are employees. They are not independent contractors like boxers are. So it's a very different setup, and they make a lot less money a fight. However, they do get a guaranteed revenue stream. And a boxer doesn't do that unless they've got a long-term fight contract, and only the big stars have that going for them, the Canelos and so forth. So I get it. But I really wish he'd strongly consider moving into another area of the sport and retiring from the ring. And he could do that. He's extremely well-liked and well-connected in Southern California, and I'd really prefer he stay there.
Fink said that Vanes would be mentioned Vanes as a possible opponent for Munguia. He asked would Vanes be the biggest name on
Oh my
on
God.
Munguia's
Machado would
resume.
kill him.
What
Yes,
did
he
I
would.
say?
Yes,
Yeah.
he would. Yes, he would. But at this point, Munguia would beat him. It would be fun because Munguia doesn't have the best defense in the world, but just too much offensive firepower. Continue on, Jacob.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Al is very complicated because, you know, on one end, he took this idea of, and, you know, he did get the fighters, you know, the main fighters they got paid. But the negative part of the PBC, in my opinion, is that, you know, he had all these fighters under his, you know, belt, and he had some divisions completely locked down, but we didn't get to see the fights, you know, until after we saw a couple gimme fights. And then, even some of the like more challenging fights and the better fights, we didn't get to see like a lot of the rematches. And it's kind of scratch your head and you're saying, okay, well, what was the point of doing this? You know, like you want to see the best fight the best in their prime, not it be strung along. But if you look at each one of his fighters, you'll see that, you know, they'll have, you know, maybe one tough fight and, you know, or against a main opponent, you know, a top 10 opponent, and then they'll have a couple, you know, just kind of like side fights. And a lot of his fighters weren't staying active too. That was another issue. So in a way, it kind of digressed or stalled the sport of boxing when we thought we were going to get, you know, a bunch of matchups, because of, you know, they didn't have to fight over, you know, television or boxing promotions or all the politics that are involved in boxing, where we don't get to see a lot of these fights. So, but again, you know, he did get these guys paid, and, you know, it is their job, and it's a hard job, it's a dangerous job. So I don't begrudge them of getting paid, but, you know, at the same time, you know, I'd like them to build a legacy. But as far as Vanes goes, I mean, I think he's well past his prime. He probably could have been a little bit more active, early on. I mean, I think he did. He fought on Andrade, but a couple times, I think, or maybe once, and knocked him down. I think he fought Lara a couple times, like once to a draw. So I mean, he's not a bad fighter, but I think he's on the lower end of his career. And at this point, if you put him in with someone like Munguia, you know, yeah, Munguia's defense isn't all that great, but I don't think it's going to take him too many rounds to figure Vanes out and drop him. You know, it might look something like what Gennady did. You know, so if that's how he wants to pick up his paychecks, you know, power to him. But I think it's going to be a tough day at the office. You're fighting killers like that.
Yeah, indeed. I want to thank Fink, Big Rotten Apple, for the question in the comments about Vanes. Fink said in one comment, you know, Billy Joe Saunders' best performance was David Lemieux. Shake my head. You're right. You're right, Fink. And he hadn't done anything since. That's the problem. That's the problem. Big Rotten Apple, you mentioned Brandon Rios coming out tomorrow to fight on the zone. The reason that I am not talking about it because, quite frankly, I don't care, and I think Brandon Rios should have stayed retired.
Hey!
I'm sorry.
Hey, it's the battle of the dad bods south of the border.
He should have stayed retired. That's why I'm not going to talk about it.
Hey, he made weight. He made weight at 152.
Whoop-de-doo, whoop-de-doo.
Contract weight of 152 for him.
And yeah, and that's the issue. 152. He has no problem. He has no reason. He shouldn't be fighting that high. I'll just say that. Let's get back quickly into the conversation about Lomachenko and Crolla. Gail, Daniel, your reaction to that?
You know, I think that was the best option Lomachenko had available to him, and I wouldn't be surprised if manager Egas Klimas said, listen, you know, going strictly down the list of potential opponents, you know, Mikey Garcia is occupied, you know, Comey out of commission, you know, you have your British fighters, Campbell and Selby, hanging there. Well, you know, That's not happening. So, once you get past Garcia and Comey, his absolute next best option was Crolla. And yeah, Crolla's record is rough, right? Just looking at the numbers, Crolla is 34-6-3. And you do look at that and think, ouch, really? Well, 2 of the losses were to Linares, and most of the rest of the losses were fairly early in his career. Funny enough, 2 of them came to Gary Sykes, 2 of the others. So 4 of the losses came to 2 guys, and then the others were British fights, local talent. So, give him a shot. He's had a couple of good fights. He's performed well since his last loss to Linares, which was in early 2017. So, and he's a mandatory. Sure, give him a shot. The problem is that, in a little bit different circumstances, Lomachenko's got the same issue he's got to deal with as Santa Cruz, which is, he's sort of in between categories of competition generationally. He's got the guys who are at the top of the division, but really near the end of their career, the sort of the senior generation. And then you've got the ones that are not quite ready for him. Remember who called him out recently? And was absolutely serious. Devin Haney. Is Devin Haney ready? No. Is it a fight we'd like to see? Sure, eventually. It'll be a great fight someday. Not today. Devin Haney is 20 years old. There is no reason to put him up against Lomachenko right now.
Well, not just Haney, more to the point, Teofimo.
I was just going to say, yeah, what about Teofimo?
Well, both of them need a little more seasoning on them. They need to marinate a little more in their own juice. But they'll both be terrific potential opponents, assuming Lomachenko remains, close to them in weight division and assuming they both stay relatively close. But in between Lomachenko and then Garcia, and, should he be willing to come down to this weight division and all the rest, it's a pretty big canyon with not a lot there. So in the scheme of things, Crolla's a good choice. And Crolla is certainly a better opponent for Lomachenko than Fuentes or Rivera were for Santa Cruz. So I'm kind of putting these 2 next to each other and comparing how they've handled this situation of really not having a full slate of possible dance partners, and Lomachenko is doing the right thing as best he can.
I can agree with you on that. It definitely is a better opponent. And
I agree with you, Jacob, that I'd rather he fight Crolla and stay active than do nothing. Sitting out is not a good option.
Your reaction, Daniel.
It's a logical move. Like we mentioned, like there's a lot of good kids are coming up of 135. Haney, obviously Teofimo. Like even on the fringes, you have Ryan Garcia, who's in the fringes at the moment. He's going to take that. Those guys are going to need at least 2 to 3 more years before they're be considered ready. And unfortunately, the other fighter that you would like to see him fighting, if it's not going to be, wasn't going to be Comey, is busy himself moving up 2 weight classes to fight Errol Spence. So it's logical. Yes, it's Anthony Crolla pretty much a tailor-made opponent for Lomachenko? Yes. Will this fight be an easy cakewalk for Lomachenko? More than likely. Will this further the criticism that Lomachenko gets that his matchmaking is made to make sure that he doesn't face a lot of risk? Yes. Will it be fair? In this case, I would say no, because that's unfortunately the one fighter that they wanted him to face is hurt, unfortunately, and that took him out. Like, and it's actually, like I said, probably a blessing in disguise for Richard Commey, because then he can focus on the next fight, do a victory lap, title defense, and then face Lomachenko. Because I've mentioned this a lot of times, lightweight lean seems to be Lomachenko's plateau. And I don't think he's going to risk trying to go back up there, because if Linares is able to knock him down to lightweight, there's a whole lot of people at 140 that will be able to do it also. So I kind of expect it. I know people don't like it. They see Anthony Crolla's record and they'll say, no, that's a tough one. But what did you expect Lomachenko to do? If he's a guy that actually wants to fight, he wants to be active. Did he want him to wait until Commey's injury heals? Because that'll take the fight until what? June, July? At the earliest?
Maybe longer. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know how long it's going to take to heal.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then it gets him off schedule from all these other guys, then they end up waiting for him, and they aren't going to want to do that. So they have to somewhat be on the same tracks as far as the fight schedules, and not get off track by a couple of months. And that's what would happen if he waited for Commey, and he just can't do it. So it's really not an option. I mean, Who else has he got? Andy Vences. I mean, if we're really struggling to find opponents, if you're really concerned about, here's a guy, hey, he's undefeated. But come on, Cole's by far the better option, even with the record. He brings experience to the fight, which is important. He does bring a fan base, which exposes his British fan base to Lomachenko. That's a benefit to him. It's a good choice.
And we have to say it. Crolla is a former champion. Like, say it or not, he is a former lightweight champion.
Right. Correct. Right.
So it's not exactly like Crolla's gonna be a guy that's not used to the limelight. The problem is that we know what's gonna happen in this fight, right? And that's what makes it disappointing.
Yeah, right. But the truth is, with rare exception, that's what's going to happen in any Lomachenko fight. I mean, we have gotten very excited about some of the matchups, the past matchups. I mean, who didn't want to see him tangle with Nicholas Walters and even Rigondeaux? And look what the hell happened. I mean, Crolla cannot do any worse. Really, Crolla cannot do worse.
Oh man, that Rigondeaux fight's that fight will always leave a bad taste in my mouth.
He could do worse. He could do a Harper and walk out of the ring.
Yeah, that's true. That's very, very true.
Yeah, but you know what? Walters practically did, and shame on him. And and same for Rigondeaux. That was ridiculous. I mean, at least the other guys who quit had really gotten some pretty significant beatdowns. They had a reason to quit. Rigondeaux, come on. He found an excuse. He was out of there. He was just out of there. And Walters was just having a toddler hissy fit. He was pissed off he was getting beat. It was his own damn fault. And he bailed out.
Yeah, but though the Rigondeaux one it leaves a bad taste in my mouth for one or two things. Number one, he found an excuse, but number two, apparently the weight disparity was such to a point where, at least in the contract wise, what Rigondeaux was able to do compared to what Lomachenko was trying to do, it looked like the weight disparity being equivalent to Triple G trying to fight Joshua as far as jumps in division. That always is going to leave a bad taste in my mouth, but the result is going to be the same. Like, Lomachenko is just so far above right now. A good amount of the boxing world around him, within at least a 3-division radius around him, from 130 to 140. That he's just that much better than a whole lot of other fighters. But we just know now that if he goes down to 130, yeah, he's gonna mollywop. But if he goes up to 140, that's where he'll probably actually face a lot of trouble, because 135 shows that if they land on him, he can be hurt and he can be bothered. You saw that with the Linares fight when knocked out, and you saw it a little bit in the Pedraza fight, because even though on the scorecards in a good amount of the fight he was dominating, Pedraza for a while was actually bothering him size-wise, and it was bothering him a little bit with technique. Even trying to go to 140 where guys will hit harder is not a good option to have at the moment.
Couple of comments here in the chat. Fink says that he wouldn't fault Loma for an excursion versus Ramirez at 140 pounds. I wouldn't be mad at that, given how Ramirez fought in his last bout. He looked vulnerable. He also says then Loma would be a three-weight titleist. Would love to see that over picking unripe fruit in Haney and Lopez. Your quick thoughts on that, Jacob. Last comment before we move on to talk heavyweights.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, the accomplishments of, getting belts against, in different divisions, but I think there's a difference between getting belts against the top tier belt holders versus someone like Ramirez, who's very vulnerable and who could potentially, well, I thought he lost his last fight, but who could potentially lose the belt, against somebody in his division anyway. But I mean, Gail's right. Crolla is a better, opponent, and it, with all the things that she said, and Daniel and everybody, for what the situation is right now, because the Comeys it is what it is. But for me, even though Lopez and Haney are young, I have more interest in seeing what these young guys would do against a Lomachenko than Crolla, who I think we can all agree we kind of know what's going to happen. I think they bring a factor in the sense that they have youth, but they also have, like Lopez, he has pretty decent power, and he seems like he wants to fight. Haney wants to fight, so it's kind of like, we tell these guys to strike while the iron's hot and to reach for glory, and we don't know that those fights are going to be available for them if Lomachenko decides to go up a division, or he whatever, he retires or whatever, that fight might not be there. So I would have more interest in one of those two, making a fight with one of those two, even though they're young and they're maybe not as accomplished, and we want to give them time, than I would with the Crolla. But I think the point was taken with what the situation is and the activity being important, that this is basically what we're kind of stuck with, which it isn't terrible. Like Gail likes to say, we don't hate it.
We don't hate it. Here's the deal with Lomachenko. His goal is to unify the division, right? So the other title holders are Comey, out of commission, Garcia fooling around up at welterweight against Spence. So there's no real risk to Garcia in the Spence fight. He loses, he's still holding a very valuable prize that Lomachenko wants. So here's the scenario. We get Spence and Garcia. Spence wins. Garcia has lost nothing he holds.
Garcia's going to win.
Nah. Well, this is the scenario Lomachenko's counting on. Let's put it that way. And I think he's right. Spence wins. Garcia goes back down to the division, lightweight division. He gets a tune-up fight, and then he puts his belt up against Lomachenko, and that then is a really big fight. Big fight. The problem, as exciting as it would be to see Lomachenko take on Haney or Lopez, the risk-reward ratio isn't big enough. They don't have titles. They're both young, hard punchers. This is the kind of fight where you're just not going to get a lot of money to put yourself at risk of that lucky punch with these kids. And they also need to bring more to the table. We all know who they are. We appreciate where they are at this point of their career. ESPN is looking for much, and Top Rank is looking for a much bigger casual fan audience for Lomachenko. And they've done really, really well putting him on regular ESPN. But they want some kind of payoff down the road. They want him and Garcia on ESPN Plus for a big title unification fight. And that's the model that's worked so well with Terrence Crawford. And say what you will, Lomachenko's real rival in the sport, not in the ring, but in the sport as far as reputation and legacy goes, is Crawford. And Crawford unified a division, he's got to do it. And that's where we are.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Let's move on to heavyweights here. I titled this particular episode, question, are we living in a golden era in terms of heavyweights? A lot of news regarding the heavyweight division. Anthony Joshua, Big Baby Miller, they kicked off their press conference earlier this week in New York. Wild affair. Tyson Fury signing with Top Rank. Deontay Wilder, free agents. News regarding Luis Ortiz, Dillian White as well. Kind of digest all of the news developments that's been coming down regarding the heavyweight division. Let's talk first about that press conference. Whoever wants to comment, please do. No holds barred here. Your reaction to what you saw from Joshua, from Big Baby, the infamous push, the trash talk, the back and forth, the fact that Big Baby got up and left the press conference early. Your reaction to what you saw. And this goes for anybody who wants to chime in.
So let's jump in. I have made no secret of the fact that I love me some Big Baby. I do. I just love the guy. I think he's good for boxing. He's a breath of fresh air. He's just a little bit of the right kind of crazy. And in this case, with his fight made with Joshua, he knows exactly what role he's been hired to play in the script. He is the villain, Joshua is the hero. And every hero needs a villain. And Miller's perfectly willing, for the size of the paycheck I'm sure he's getting, to play the villain. And he'll do a damn good job of it. And he needs to be careful that he doesn't let it spill into his personal life and he doesn't become in danger of becoming an Adrian Broner type of villain. But those guys do put butts in the seats. So he's going to be, a little bit of the brash, ugly American, right? Push him around, talk some shit, gin up interest in the fight and do exactly what he's being asked to do. And then he's got another job he's got to worry about in the ring. But I guarantee you he will do a perfect job in his role outside the ring.
Daniel, Jacob, your reaction to that presser?
It's what was needed a little bit, because Joshua at this point is in full-blown politician mode. He's not going to stir the waters. He's not going to do anything outlandish. He's going to show up, be proper, and get done for the fight. So kind of in the similar way to how Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, the first fight happened, is up to the challenger to spice things up. It's pretty much up to the challenger to promote the fight. And Big Baby did it to a good extent. Like, he talked trash, he pushed Joshua, and he got in his face. The interesting part of it, though, is we're not going to see, that's probably about the extent that we're going to see in the U.S. for the time being. We were supposed to get a lot more yesterday. But literally at the last minute, scheduled appearances for both Joshua and Big Baby throughout ESPN were canceled.
Yeah, Joshua, correct me if I'm wrong, was supposed to be on First Take. Was supposed to have like some kind of face-off in which Big Baby just abruptly said no to, or either it began and he would abruptly walked out of the room. So yeah,
It was beyond that. It was a little bit where ESPN is the one that canceled it, and like I said, and they were planning it out. Max Kellerman was on his show, First Take, hyping the fact that, hey, I'm gonna have my show, boxing, and I'm gonna have Anthony Joshua, and I'm gonna have Big Baby Miller on it. Now, that's a whole different avenue goes into it, because apparently it may be the issue may be John Skipper. And John Skipper right now is a high up figure in the zone. He used to be a president of ESPN, but he didn't exactly leave under exceptional circumstances. I'll leave it at there. It wasn't controversial, but he didn't exactly leave under exceptional circumstances. And so that's a little bit of what got rebuffed, because they were planning all Thursday throughout to have this build up, and to have it all canceled at the last minute. Because if Big Baby would have left, they could have still done Joshua and have Joshua going all out, and then that would have hyped up the fight even more. But no, they canceled everything. That was one thing. But as far as like this fight goes, it's going to be interesting to see how Big Baby is going to act in London next week, because there he can play the angry, ugly American role, where unfortunately we have to face it.
He's not going to get away with that in the UK.
Well, here's the thing, though, and remember, and this is something that Americans, we know pretty well. We're going to get that bad rap anyway. It's just a bad rap that Americans get because of rightfully how a lot of Americans act when they're outside the U.S.
Oh, and worse yet, Daniel, he's a New Yorker. He's from Brooklyn. Oh, my God. You know what? He needs to be the guy they love to hate.
Yeah.
They're going to hate him anyway. You're absolutely right. So why not lean into it? And he can take it. He loves it. He loves the attention. He's perfect for it. Honestly, it is a great role for him. And he is perfectly willing to engage with the fans on social media, talk trash about them, just mix it up. He's a pretty clever guy. He loves to run his mouth. He loves to run his social media mouth. He's just built for it. He really is. But he does have to not get distracted so much by that and be having so much fun with it that he forgets to prepare for the fight.
Oh, no. You know what? I just thought of something, Big Baby. Like, if there's anybody in the chat from the UK, if Gus is there, because I have a feeling Gus is there, have Big Baby take, like, your most famous restaurant's fish and chips and just throw it down the Thames River and say, I don't need this trash. I eat Coney Island hot dogs. That'll pretty much have him almost completely kicked out of Heathrow Airport immediately. But that's what he needs to do, because Joshua's not going to be the one to do it. That's the interesting part about this fight. The guy that needs to be the star, the guy that is trying to show out and be the showcase, is the guy who's not going to do the job of promoting. It's the other guy that has to do it, because
I don't think
Joshua is.
I don't know if that's completely fair. Yeah,
I think he's going to, he's going to play the classy half of the pairing. He's going to try to take the high road. I mean, and Joshua's perfectly capable, if he thought it was in his best interest, of getting right up in Miller's face. But he doesn't need to do that. That's not his persona there.
And
he is the ripped superhero in white. Come on. He does not need to get down in the gutter with Miller at all to promote the fight.
And when Miller tried to go there against the in terms of the fish and chips comment, Joshua's comments was quite cheeky. B, you don't think he's doing some of that part of promotion with the appearance on Charlemagne's show and the freestyle he dropped on Sway in the Morning?
Oh no! Oh no! I popped that freestyle on Sway in the Morning. I don't mean in the sense of the fact that he's not doing anything at all. I mean, the fact that he's going to play it safe. He's going to play it in the fact that I have a fight coming up. I'm the favorite. I'm not going to stir the waters because get to know me, and I think Joshua get to like me.
Well, I don't think it's playing it safe to take the high road, which is what he's going to do. That's the role written for him. He's the sort of classy, suave British hero, and he can pull that off for this fight. It's going to be a little tougher to do when he's looking across at somebody who's got more of the boxing chops than Miller does, which is the winner of the Fury and Wilder rematch, whoever that is. And if it happens to be Fury, then the gloves are off outside the ring for sure.
Let's get Jacob into the discussion because he's being left out here. Your thoughts, Jacob?
So for me, I'm with Gil. I love me some Big Baby. I think he's a big dude, much like myself. So I sympathize with him there. He's not. How do I say this? I mean, he has skills. I think he's gonna provide an interesting fight. He's gonna talk trash because that's what he does. And Joshua is going to play his role, and I don't think he's playing it safe. I think he's just playing it smart because, unfortunately, with Big Baby doing that shove, what I hope doesn't happen is what I said earlier when we're before the show went live, is that I would hate to see a fight like this not materialize because someone falls off the stage or gets injured or they get into little fisticuffs and then the fight doesn't happen. For basically, we don't get a full fight, and we get a 6-second street fight. Where a couple punches get thrown, but people get in trouble, get suspended, whatever, and we don't have a fight. So I hope it doesn't escalate there. But I could see Joshua; he's very poised, and he knows that. Because if they don't have a fight, he's not going to get paid, right? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. This is the fight game, and it's the prize fighting, right? So this is his chance for his first fight coming to the Madison Square Gardens, which is the mecca of boxing, to make a great impression. If he can come and fight and knock this guy out in spectacular fashion, that's a good introduction to America. So that's going to set him up for bigger paydays and bigger fights down the road. He's already popular in his home country, so he doesn't have to do any of that stuff there. He's got to ingrace himself to this new audience of people that don't know him. But he's a good-looking guy. He carries himself well. I actually thought his freestyling wasn't bad. I've heard worse from other boxers and even some other athletes that have released albums that I don't think have any flow. So I mean, he put a little bit of his fighting life into his rhymes and stuff like that. So I was impressed with that. But I'm excited for this fight. I think this is, if we weren't going to get the Dillian White fight and we knew we weren't going to get the Wilder fight and the Fury fight, I don't think this is a bad substitute because he's never fought this guy before. Big Baby's a big guy. There's some obvious animosity there. And, all they're going to do is promote the fight and, get people hopefully to watch. That's nobody wants to see a conference where they just say, I respect my opponent and, I'm going to do my best when the night comes and blah, blah, blah. People want to see trash talking. And I wouldn't go so far as to say they can't get away with certain things in England, because over there they're throwing tables off the ground at their opponent.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
So I mean,
I forgot what Derek Chisholm did to Dillian White with that table. I forgot about that.
Additionally, they had that Joker McGregor. He was doing all kinds of stuff when he was over there, getting in Floyd's face and even touching him a little bit and stuff like that. So they like a show just as much as anybody else. So I think they'll let it go to the point of, obviously not get too physical. Because even in that shove, Joshua did try to come, and he said, no, I'm not going to shove him. Let's just do the face off. And, Big Baby didn't want to do it because he was getting all crazy. And then somebody said something to him, and Joshua jumped off the stage and actually went to go after this other guy. I don't know. I didn't see who it was, but I think somebody from Big Baby's camp was mouthing off to him, and he actually got off the stage and, it got a little crazy. But, that's gonna get clicks, and, it's clickbait. This is perfect for promotion.
Let's move on to the next story. I'm going to combine the Fury Wilder stuff into one. I'm going to you, Daniel, first. As I said, Fury, it was announced, it signed a promotional deal with top rank. He did an interview with Max Kellerman today on Max Kellerman's boxing show. Deontay Wilder, on the other hand, he announced that, as far as he's concerned, that he is a free agent, but the goal is to make a rematch with Tyson Fury. Talk about those two developments from a business standpoint, and given the signing of Fury with Top Rank, given Wilder saying he's a free agent, so he can conceivably go anywhere and everywhere, any direction he wants, do you think we will see a rematch between Fury and Wilder? Do you think we will see it sooner or later?
It may become later, because this is an interesting dynamic when you look at how this is structured. Because number one, when it comes to Fury, remember, he's still getting sued by his original promoter, Hennessy, in the UK, because he linked up with Frank Warren. Realistically, a move to ESPN would make sense because Frank Warren has an agreement with ESPN. So that makes sense as far as, okay, I'm now a Frank Warren fighter in Tyson Fury, and I'll fight on ESPN, and the network has stated that they won't be the ones to stand in the way of big fights. The wrinkle came into it when he mentioned that it's a co-promotional deal with Top Rank. That's where it gets really, really murky. Now, for Bob, for Aaron, this is a coup, because obviously he hoped to get into the Joshua sweepstakes using Byron Jennings, but that loss obviously derailed any plans. So linking up with Frank Warren, co-promoting a guy who we didn't think would be back to what he was a year ago, and now you can legitimately say he should challenge Joshua. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense, but the problem is, unfortunately, though, is the always chilly and sometimes bitter business relationship between Bob Arum and, of course, Al Heyman. Anybody that tries to tell me right now that Deontay Wilder is a Lou DiBella fighter, show me the promotional contract. Show me the contract where Deontay Wilder, signed on the dotted line saying, I am actually being promoted by Lou DiBella. He's not. It's Al Heyman. He just picks Lou DiBella because he fights a lot more in the East Coast. So when you have that factored into it, and you have the fact that pretty much Bob Arum and Al Heyman do not like to do business with one another unless they have no choice, it throws a wrench into this, because while Frank Warren may be wanting to do a deal, Bob may not want to do a deal. And now you just made him, you had him co-sign for you. He's your partner in this now. So if it's an equal partner, Frank Warren can agree to a fight with Wilder tonight, and it can get vetoed by Bob. That's the bad part of this. That's the bad part of it. Now, as far as Wilder mentioned that he's a free agent as far as networks, because people think he has an exclusive contract with Showtime, therefore he can't go anywhere but Showtime. That's not exactly true. Like, he has an agreement, but he's a free agent as far as networks go. The problem's going to be, again, like I mentioned, he's not actually promoted by Lou DiBella. He's promoted by Al Heyman. And if you're promoted by Al Heyman and you're a marquee fighter, there are only two places you're gonna fight. You're either gonna fight on Showtime or you're gonna fight right now on Fox. That's it. And if you throw Fox into it, then ESPN will likely step in because Fox and ESPN aren't exactly the best of friends when it comes to networks. And I think like Fox Sports recently got mad because ESPN swiped the UFC from them. So there's a lot of wrinkles going into it. I think the fight will eventually happen because the first fight was just so good that you want to see it again. And realistically, for either guy, there's really not much of an option as far as outsider opponents. Like for Wilder, okay, you get to fight Dominic Brazil. He's your mandatory. Yes, there's some history there, but we know it's going to wind up happening in that fight. You're probably going to knock Dominic Brazil out. It's even worse for Fury because then the only other option is fight Joshua. And if there's a bitter relationship between Al Heyman and Bob Arum, it's an even more bitter relationship between Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren. So they kind of have to fight each other. They have no choice, realistically. It's just going to take longer, though, because now you have that added barrier of Bob Arum into the mix.
Last question before we move on and start previewing fights. Again, as I said when we began this little segment talking about the heavyweights, the question that I titled this particular episode in a question, like, are we in a heavyweight golden era? I'm gonna leave this conversation before we move on to preview some fights by asking the question: are we in a heavyweight golden era? First Gail, and then Daniel.
As compared to what? The 1970s?
70s, early mid 90s.
No and no. Maybe we will be. We're not there yet.
Your thoughts, Daniel? Are we in a heavyweight golden era with Joshua, with Wilder, with Fury, Dillian White, Luis, Ortiz, and the like?
I would agree with Gail. We're not there, but we're at the cusp of it. Mainly because of players who are not there yet, but are going to be in the next couple of years. Whether it's going to be Usyk, who steps up now from cruiserweight and starts fighting heavyweights.
Usyk, by the way, whose heavyweight debut will be in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. There's that. There's obviously like a guy that's gonna fight this weekend, Joe Joyce. There's Daniel Dubois. There's Tony Yoka. There's a good amount of fighters. There's Junior Fa also as well. There's a good plethora of fighters at heavyweight that are probably at least 2 to 3 years away from being legitimate contenders. At that point, I'll say we're in the golden age right now because right now, yes, the division is a lot more interesting and a lot more stacked than it was when the Klitschko's were dominating it. But when you tend to look at the actual competition, okay, as obviously Joshua right now is the top guy as far as the belts. He has 3 of them. You have Tyson Fury, who's the lineal champion, who just proved everybody wrong that he could recover. But at the same time, we don't know how he can go off the rails any minute. And then the other champion is Wilder, who has somewhat peaked as far as what he's able to do in the ring, but he has arguably the best sleeper in the sport as his saving grace a lot of times. And then you look at the other contenders right now that would be good. Dillian White, we know he fights, but he probably is not a world caliber fighter. He's probably at best European level. Adair Chisora, even more in that sense. Luis Ortiz is a fighter that, unfortunately, if he would have been 5 years younger, would be in that class, but he's reached a point where the age is starting to creep in. Those are the factors that are coming into it. Like, the division is starting to be filled up, and the young guys are coming up. But the problem, unfortunately, is that it's still centered around three guys, and three guys who each have their own distinct flaws. Obviously, like, we know Fury, we don't know what he's going to do. We don't know how he can go off the rails, but he's proven that if he is actually focused, he can actually fight.
The fact that he's signing this deal to me says that he's focused.
Yeah.
His mind is into it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you just need to hope that it doesn't teeter off. But like I mentioned, Wilder, he technically the least proficient of the three, but he evens it out with his power. And then Joshua, who is in the middle as far as technical and defensive skill between the three, and he's a lot more polished than Wilder. But as shown in the Klitschko fight, if somebody that's real top world class actually steps up to him, he's susceptible to being outboxed, and he's susceptible to being knocked down. And Fury presents that. So each fighter is linked up in this way. We're on the cusp of it. The main hinge to me is going to be how Usyk fares. If Usyk is able to fight the same way he fights right now at cruiserweight, at heavyweight, and not have issues with people's power, then yeah, we're going to be in for a good golden age.
Okay, let's move on to preview some fights. A couple of fights I'm going to focus on mainly. And no, as I said earlier in the chat, I'm not talking about Brandon Rios. I refuse.
Come on.
Go ahead.
Come on. You know you're going to watch DAZN.
No, I won't.
You know what? The fight means absolutely nothing, and it could be damned entertaining. So just buyer beware, but it is on DAZN, and it's actually not a bad card. Senicia Estrada is on the undercard. There's a couple of Golden Boy fighters on the undercard. Yeah, hey, you got nothing better to do. Come on.
Anyway, let's talk about Anthony Dirrell, who's fighting for Ramirez. Oh, not Ramirez. Fighting for the vacant WBC title. Who's the guys? I'm having a brain freeze, Daniel. Who's the guy who vacated because had a strip because he tested positive for the cocoa?
David Benavidez.
There you go, David Benavidez. He's fighting a guy who, quite frankly, I have really haven't heard of. Avni Yildirim. I'm gonna rely on this guy.
Avni Yildirim,
That's
yeah.
absolutely right. Avni Yildirim from.
I'm gonna rely on you guys because I haven't heard much of him. If you have any comments on this fight with him and Dirrell.
All his fights to date have been outside the United States. Although interestingly, he has fought in Mexico. He's also fought in the Dominican Republic, but he's fought a lot in Germany. And you know, these guys, they're just sort of a non-factor. However, he has fought one opponent most people will know, Chris Eubank Jr., and he lost by a third-round knockout.
Okay, now I remember that fight. Yeah, that fight I remember.
That was 2 years ago in 2017. That fight was in Stuttgart, Germany, which is sort of interesting. So, you know, is he truly deserving of the shot? You know, we got another issue where we've got a guy that we say, well, is he really, a worthy opponent, deserving in in a vacuum? No. But absent other options, you know, he has fought some name opposition. It's the best they can do. The truth is, no matter what happens in this fight, David Benavidez is going to wipe the floor with the winner. That's it.
Do you agree, Daniel?
Yeah. Granted, yeah, this is the Dirrell, twin, the Dirrell brother that has actually been a champion, a full champion. He's the one that has the tenacity. Like I said, that's if only there was a way to mix those two together. Unfortunately, you would have had a hell of a fighter. But like I said, but Anthony is a former champion. He knows what it takes to win. He got through a hard way to do it, because we have to remember those fights against Sakio Bika were not pretty at all. Were not pretty at all.
Right.
To get the title.
That second fight with Bika at StubHub Center was one of the messiest fights I've ever seen, to the point that if you all recall, a famous incident in the middle of the fight involving referee Jack Reese, who stopped the fight and told both guys to knock it off. You look like shit in there.
Yes. Yes, I remember that.
And for those of you who've never seen it, look it up. Dirrell versus Bika, August 2014. It was hot as hell. And it was on the undercard of the Brooke Porter fight. So it is just one of the damn funniest things in boxing I've ever seen. And ringside, you could hear Reese say that to these guys. Knock it off. You look like shit in there.
Yep. He did that. But at least he got the belt and he was a champion. But I agree. I agree with you, Gail. Like, whoever wins this fight, it's going to get mollywopped by Benavidez. He's just going to get mollywopped by him. It's not anything against Anthony, because I'm picking Anthony to win this fight. The problem is, unfortunately, Benavidez is a pretty big super middleweight. We have to remember that he started, I think, the early parts of his amateur and early in his career as heavyweight. He used boxing as a way to get in shape. And he just happened to fight. Yeah, and he just happened to fight the right weight division for him. So, yeah, that's gonna be an interesting dynamic, an interesting fight. But we know who's waiting in the wing. It's kind of the same situation with whoever's gonna claim the WBC bantamweight or the bantamweight belt. You kind of know Luis. In that case, Luis Nery is just waiting there to mollywop you.
Right, I think I'll agree here. While the fight is a good fight, it really doesn't matter who wins, because they're going to fight David Benavidez next, and David Benavidez will beat both of them. Let's move on to the UK. This fight between, first of all, let me say the Dirrell fight against Yildirim is going to be held tomorrow in Minneapolis, so you can see it on Fox Sports 1. Going over to the UK now, grudge match, if you will. James DeGale, Chris Eubank Jr. Showtime has decided to pick it up. Kind of a crossroads bout for both guys. Daniel, Eubank Jr. coming off the loss against Groves. DeGale, he lost the title, he won the title, but still, his career is a bit suspect, because many feel, as a result of the Badou Jack bout, he hasn't been the same since. When he lost the title, he did look very good and didn't look great, to be honest with you, when he re-won the title against last year. So you just don't know where DeGale is physically. I will say this: I personally think that he will, because there's such bad blood here, I think DeGale will raise his game up. As suspicious as I am of DeGale, I'm even more suspicious of Eubank, because in the Groves fight, going into it, I thought he would have learned his lesson from the loss to Billy Joe Saunders, but he didn't learn a thing. He fought pathetic in that fight. He fought stuck on stupid. And even in the lead up, if you really listen to Chris Eubank Sr., he has some questions about his son too, in terms of his development, and will he really listen to reason, and will he fight a smart fight?
Oh, yeah. Chris Eubanks in a smart fight. That's not exactly a good combination to have. Now, here's the situation when it comes into it, because it is a crossroads fight for both guys. I would go further back, Mike, as far as where DeGale has not been the same. To me, DeGale has not been the same, not since the Badou Jack fight, since the Butte fight, since the Medina fights. And those type of fights where he had to exercise a lot more than what he did, and those opponents took him to the limit. And in this sense, like, he's at the end, he's pretty much at the end of the road. There's not much he can do after this. Like, there's no way he can go up to light heavyweight. And he's unfortunately too big to probably even attempt to go down the middleweight. So he's kind of stuck in this place. With Eubanks, it's a different story. It's a story of unfulfilled potential. And it's mainly his father's fault. We have to agree that we know LeVar Ball. We know how he talks about his son when it comes to NBA and the Lakers. But LeVar Ball is the Chris Eubank Sr. of the basketball world. Because Chris Eubank Sr. is the one that has hyped up his son to a point where he can't live up to those expectations. It reached to the point where he had to claim that he was a world titleist at super middleweight, with a title that, yeah, it's gaining prominence because the IBO is actually recognizing really good fighters as champions, but it's not there yet. It's not fully recognized as a belt yet. So, and then in your biggest tests in that weight class, you didn't look good. So they both need to win this fight. It's a fight where either guy can move on, the other guy can get this started. Ultimately, is it a fight of actual consequence at the end? No, unfortunately to me. Because whoever wins, they're going to run to a division that has passed them by in a way. If DeGale wins, there's a lot of good fighters now that are starting to come up at super middleweight that could probably take him. If Eubanks wins, now that Billy Ho is at super middleweight, that's the only fight people want him to make. If he wins, people want that rematch in the UK. So, but obviously there's a good chance we're not going to get that fight. So it kind of is a fight of little consequence as far as the grander scheme of things, but it's very important as far as a personal level when it comes to both men.
Your thoughts, Gail?
Yeah, it's a fight that's of regional interest. Good to show. Good, Mike. Compliments to Showtime for picking it up. It's on nice and early in the afternoon, and we can watch a little early boxing action before we settle in to see all that good action from Tijuana. But these guys, you're right, Daniel. Eubank has the classic problem of being the son of a very skilled, famous fighter who came up the hard way, who earned all the accolades that he's gotten and deserves it. You know, and the son's path, even when they have a lot of talent, is very different. There's different expectations put on them. The pressure is there from the get-go. Things are a little too easy in a way. And it is a classic story where they don't reach their potential because the fight isn't coming from their heart for themselves. It's coming from externally driven reasons, and they just don't perform well under those circumstances. So I just don't think Eubank has the fire to really stick it out when it gets rough. On the other hand, DeGale has not had a stoppage win, except for his last tune-up fight. He did fight a little nothing fight a few months ago.
Yeah, I want to
Actually,
say in California, was it?
yeah, against Fidel Munoz in Ontario. I mean, he was almost sort of hidden from view. It was one of those fights just to test himself, because all of his fights before that last one, he won against Truax in the rematch. And then he had that really rough majority decision against Jack. And you're right, Daniel. Before that, it was Porky Medina, which was an absolute barn burner of a fight. Who knew? And then Boutte and Dirrell. So go back that far. He has fought 12-round rough fights in the last 4 years. And I mean, not a round off in any of those fights. And that is a lot of punishment. What has he got left in the gas tank? You know, no shame to him if he finds out that he's done. He's just not got enough left. He's just taken too many shots. He's lost too many teeth. I mean, who knows? But I think he's got enough to beat Eubank, because DeGale does have the will. He might not have the skill. He might be a little too beat up to summon the skills he needs, but that kind of will be a skilled guy who just doesn't have it in him to push past any sort of challenge or pain or shots. I think DeGale will pull this out, but I do think it could be yet another very rough, long 12-round fight. And you know what? The fans at the O2 Arena, if that happens, will love every damn second of it. And that's who this fight is for. It's a hometown grudge, it's a home country grudge match fight, and they'll get it on. Those fans are going to go nuts. And if that's the way they both go out, great. I'm sure the winner will want to continue. And if it's Eubank, he's probably got more potential, to get a few more years out of his career than DeGale. If DeGale wins, for goodness sakes, he should retire, and no shame to him.
And I think we're going to start to shut the show down on that night. On that note, excuse me. I want to thank Jacob for joining us. He was on the show for most of the episode. He had to dip off because he had to catch a train home from work. But he is in the YouTube chat commenting there. Also want to thank Fink, Big Rotten Apple for their comments and their questions in the live YouTube chat. Want to go around the panel here. Start the show with ladies first. Going to end the show with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk small business advice, for those who want to talk Game of Thrones, Dancing with the Stars. Let the folks know where they can find you.
2 weeks, or 2 weeks, 2 months.
2 months.
Game of Thrones, 2 months. It's the only reason.
Technically less than 2 months. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only reason I'm hanging on to my HBO subscription now that they don't. Come on, let's get it on. You can talk with me about actually just about anything, but boxing gets my attention. And my column is at Communities Digital News, which is COM, COMM, Digi, DIGI News, comdiginews.com. I'm PR Pro San Diego on the Twitter and the Gram.
I mentioned Jacob, if you want to check him out, talking boxing, talking movies. He's also a frequent guest of the Wrong Real movie podcast. You can check him out on Twitter at JRATM23. That is at JRATM23. If you want to check out his work over at Jab Hook, where he's the co-founder and senior editor, just go to jabhookboxing.com. That's again jabhookboxing.com. I'm going to you, Daniel. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Ruckus99. Me, Jerome Francis, is going to do the show next week. Unfortunately, the business had to preclude this week's episode, but definitely catch us in. And this weekend, most likely on Sunday, I'll be able to have some pieces up, particularly probably discussing the dynamic now we have facing with Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, because it's a situation, I think, to me, where where it's out of both men's hands. It's in the hands of people that really can screw things up, and it's not going to be. Let's put it to this way, folks: if the fight doesn't happen, it's not Deontay's fault, and it's not Tyson's fault.
Indeed. If you like what you've heard, please hit that like button on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button. Also, subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and leave a review on iTunes, especially. We'd love the review. Would help boost the ratings of the show. If you want to talk boxing, not boxing, music, fitness, with yours truly, you can check me out on Twitter. You know what it is, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I always say to begin the show, if you want to check out all things regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to hit up. P4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. That's the link. Check the rather blog page to find links to where to find us all over social media, where to find us on all available platforms that carry podcasts. We're on most of them, minus Spotify. We even over in the UK on Player FM over in the UK. So check us out there for the UK folks. Also, check out the donate button. Let donation be the best nation. Got a PayPal and a Cash Me link there as well. On the next episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, we will do a recap of Dirrell Yildirim for the vacant super middleweight title. Do a recap of DeGale Eubank, and we didn't talk about it tonight. Finks asked the question about Joe Joyce and Lee Selby. We will talk. We will do a recap of that next week. Joe Joyce stepping up in competition to fight Bermane Stavern. Lee Selby following his loss to Warrington for the featherweight belt, moving up in weight to face Omar Douglas in a 12-round lightweight contest. We will recap those fights, and we will do a preview of. Look it up right quick. A guy you talked about during the heavyweight discussion, Daniel, Junior Fa. He's fighting next week. We'll do first time talking about him on Pound for Pound Box Report. So looking forward to that. And Arislandi Lara, he's returning to the ring next week. I believe this is his first fight again since his loss to
You're right.
Hurd.
Mm-hmm.
He's fighting Brian Castano, so we will talk about those bouts. So yeah, for Jacob, for Gail for Communities Digital News, for Jacob from Jackbook Boxing, Daniel from the Inscriber. I am your host, Michael. This has been episode 241 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Once again, want to thank Big Rotten Apple. Want to thank Fink for joining us in the live YouTube chat. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Night, folks.